بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Today's name that we are going to be covering with regards to our class, the 99 ways to be happy through the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is Al-Baatin. Al-Baatin is one of the four names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that appears in a sequence in that verse that I mentioned to all of you, chapter 57, verse 3 earlier. هو الأول والآخر والظاهر والباطن. And that means Al-Baatin has several meanings, mainly three. And it means that he is the hidden. It also means that he is the knower of the hidden. And it means that someone who is so close to you that he is the intimate. Someone who is very near to you. Someone who is the most nearest to you. And we will explain what that means. So Al-Baatin means the hidden, the knower of the hidden, and the one that is the most closest to you. And Al-Baatin is the name of Allah that is mentioned, is one of those names of Allah that is mentioned only once in the Quran. So you can imagine how much information there is out there, right? It's very little, but you have to dig deeper when in the Hadith, because the Hadith complements the Quran. And we have occasions where the Prophet ﷺ has asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through his name Al-Baatin. Okay. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is the hidden, who is veiled from his creation, both in this world and in the hereafter to the kuffar, right? So the kuffar, they will not be able to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whereas for the believers, we will be able to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his truest form. Yet we cannot grasp Allah. And we mentioned that earlier in one of the names of Allah. We cannot grasp the sight of Allah, yet we can see him with our eyes, because to grasp Allah, then that is limiting Allah. Yet we are able, just like, for example, we cannot grasp the ocean. We can see the ocean, but we cannot comprehend, or we cannot grasp the entirety of the ocean. Or something as something smaller than an ocean, like the mountain. We can see the mountain, like Mount Everest. But we cannot grasp the entirety of that mountain. Likewise, on the Day of Judgment, in Jannah, the believers will be able to see Allah, because Allah will remove the hijabs in front of him, the veils in front of him. But we will not be able to grasp, to fully grasp him. But we will be honored with the sight of Allah. Okay. So we cannot encompass his essence fully and completely. Allah, he says in the Quran, in chapter 6, verse 103, لا تدركه الأبصار وهو يدرك الأبصار وهو اللطيف الخبير. No vision can grasp him, but his grasp is over all vision. He is the most subtle and courteous. He is Al-Latif. And we mentioned, for those that have started this class from the beginning, we mentioned that name of Allah, Al-Latif, and he is Al-Khabir, and we also mentioned that name. And for those that are just joining us in the past few weeks, we will be mentioning that to you guys. And he is well acquainted with everything. He is Al-Khabir. And we will mention or rather Al-Khabir is different than Al-Alim. Okay? So Al-Baatin has also been explained to me that he is the all-knower of all hidden. So the first paragraph deals with that he is the hidden. And this is the ayah that backs up that claim. And I've mentioned this a couple or a few times before, that anything that is claimed in the paragraph before, it will definitely be backed up either by a Quranic ayah or a authentic prophetic hadith. Okay? So Al-Baatin, he has also been explained. The meaning of Al-Baatin is that he is the all-knower of the hidden matters. He's the one from whom nothing is hidden, yet he is hidden from everything. And he surrounds everything and all things by his knowledge. He knows even the inner states of the creation, yet is hidden from their perception. That is Al-Baatin's knowledge. And Allah, he says in the Quran in chapter 13, verse 10, chapter 13, verse 10, it is the same to him, to Allah, whether any of you conceals his speech or declares it openly. Meaning, it is the same to Allah whether we speak within ourselves or whether we speak, whether we whisper or whether we speak out loud. Whether he be hidden by night or go forth freely by day. It is the same to Allah. And also Allah, he says in chapter 2, verse 255, he knows what happens to them, meaning his creations, his creatures, in this world, and what will happen to them in the hereafter. And they will never compass anything of his knowledge except that which he wills. And this tells us that anything that the scientists, anything that we discover in this world or even outside of this world in outer space, that is only by the permission of Allah. If you look at the development of just the basic science, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he gave them the knowledge, the discovery of a cell. They said the smallest creation or the smallest living thing is the cell. Everyone is created from a cell, and that is the smallest thing that is out there. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them something else, and that is the contents of the cells. For example, the chromosomes, the mitochondria, the DNA, the RNA, all of these things Allah gave them by his will. Then they found out that there's even smaller than that, the nucleus. Then they found out that the nucleus, there's even smaller than that. And Allah gave them the neutron. Then they found out something smaller than the neutron, the proton. Then Allah gave them something much smaller than that, the electron. And they started saying electron is the smallest thing. Then they found out that in the electron there are other particles like the quarks, or actually before that they found out that there was neon, muon, boson. And then in the electrons they found out that there were 4 quarks that makes up the electron. And they're saying that is the smallest part. So throughout time, they keep on saying this is the smallest, this is the smallest, this is the tiniest thing that we have, right? Found. Smallest than the electron was the photon. So all of these things, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is saying that they will never be able to encompass anything of his knowledge except that which he wills. So whatever they have found, whether at the micro or at the macro level, whether it is the huge planetary discovery or whether it is these electrons and photons, it is all by the will of Allah, the permission of Allah. And then also Allah, he says in chapter 2, verse 235. Chapter 2, verse 235. And know that Allah knows what is within yourselves, so beware of Him. Imagine if people could read our thoughts, right? Imagine if people could read what we think of them. How are we going to be careful? Are we not going to think twice before we have such a thought? But with Allah, and Allah, He is far more deserving of that consciousness and that respect. Allah, He's saying, and know that Allah knows what is within yourselves. And then He says, so beware of Him. And also Allah, He says in chapter 6, verse 3, and He is Allah in the heavens and on the earth. He knows what you conceal and what you reveal, and He knows what you earn. So you see how Allah, He starts very, with very big objects, the heavens and the earth, right? Meaning, if you are to think that Allah, okay, He knows, of course, He knows, He's above the seven heavens. He knows what's going on in the heavens. He knows in general what's going on in the earth, right? But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, even the smallest thing He knows. So He knows both at the macro level, the heavens, the stars, the galaxies, the universes. And then He says, He knows what you conceal, and that is the smallest thing. Meaning no one can see this. At least an electron, people can see it with an electronic microscope. Right? But what you conceal in your heart, that is probably the smallest thing. No one can see that. No X-ray, no MRI, nothing. So He knows what you conceal and what you reveal. And He knows what you earn. Your rizqi, your sustenance. He knows where you got your money from. Some of the scholars, such as Ibn Jarir al-Tabari, he is considered to be the source, the fountain of the tafsir of the Quran, from which all the other tafsir of the Quran draw their interpretation from. So he is someone who is considered to be the source, not one of the source, the source of the tafsir of the Quran. So Ibn Kathir, Al-Qurtubi, everyone draws from him. Everyone takes from him, and then they add more to it, to contextualize it, to give other examples. He explains that Al-Baatin, it means the most intimate, someone who is the most closest to you and the most near to you than everything or anyone else. And he explains that by mentioning this verse of the Quran in chapter 50, verse 16. Allah, He says, and indeed we have created man, and we know what his own self whispers to him. So remember, I mentioned that whisper, that thought that is in your brain, nothing can detect that. Allah, He says, and we, of course, we over here is what they call a royal pronoun. A royal pronoun, which means that this is what the royals use, this is how they speak to refer to I. It's called the royal pronoun. And indeed, we have created man, and we know what his own self whispers to him, and we are nearer to him than his jugular vein. That is how close Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, by His knowledge. By His knowledge. So He is the most near to us by his knowledge. He is the most intimate by his knowledge. So what are some of the benefits that we can derive from Al-Baatin? What are some of the benefits that we can derive from Al-Baatin? We all go through a tough time in our lives. Different stages, different phases, and we all make dua to Allah. Sometimes that dua gets accepted, and sometimes, according to our limited perception and knowledge, it seems like it is not getting accepted. Okay? But I want you guys to think and remind yourself of the times when Allah did respond to you and He came to your help. And then write down the times that you did not get the help that you wanted, or the thing that you wanted. So it was, according to your limited perception, it was denied to you. But you came to realize the wisdom of that denial later on. So for example, you really wanted that position. You really wanted that job. You really wanted to marry that person. 10 years, 20 years down the line, you see that individual and you are thankful that you did not get married to that person. Or you are in this current position at your work and you are thankful that you did not accept that position. Otherwise, it would have held you back or whatever it is. List it down. And in both, there is a benefit, right? If it's accepted, alhamdulillah, you saw how Allah responded to you. And if it was not, but then you were made to realize the wisdom later on in life. So when we realize how intimate Al-Baatin was with us and our situation during all of these difficult times, we will start to understand how close He was to us. That's how close Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to us, even though He's above the 7 heavens and above His throne. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in chapter 2, verse 186, chapter 2, verse 186, Allah, He says, and when my servants ask you, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and when my servants ask you concerning me, indeed I am near. I respond to the invocation, to the dua of the supplicant when he calls upon me. See, over here, Allah, He says, indeed, and that is for emphasis. This word over here, Allah doesn't use it if He's not trying to draw our attention to that emphasis. Every single letter, in fact, even the vowels like the fatha and the kasra, they signify some sort of emphasis or some wisdom behind it. So for example, if you have lam with a kasra, that has one type of connotation, and a lam with a fatha has a completely different. And lam with the fatha is called lam tawqid, which means indeed, no doubt, verily. Shadda, most often than not, emphasizes emphasizes an emphasis or indicates an emphasis. So Allah, He's saying, when my servants ask you concerning me, indeed, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي. So inna is always an emphasis there. So anytime you see inna, wa anna, qad, laqad, These are all emphasis that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran to draw our attention to them. So Allah, He says, when we ask Him, indeed I am near, I respond to the invocation of the supplicant when he calls upon me. So let them respond to me by obedience and believe in me that they may be rightly guided. Okay? And just as a side note, anything that you see in brackets and anything that you see in parentheses, they are not the actual words of the Quran, but they are there in order to give us the context or further elaboration what it means. So, and when my servants ask you, who is this you, right? Someone might be wondering. So that's why the translators will go ahead. But in the Arabic language, you will know. But in the English language, you wouldn't know. And so if you're reading in English, you wouldn't know. So that's why the translators, I mean, in the Quran, it doesn't mention, oh, Muhammad. And it doesn't say rightly guided, but the context suggests that you should put rightly guided. Right? And respond to me. So what does that mean? Meaning by obedience. And this is completely okay. And it is permissible. And that is just a small, you know, a small tafsir, I guess you could say, that these translators try to input in order to give us context, in order to elaborate on some of the things that people might misunderstand or not understand at all. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is how close He is to us, that He says, when you call upon me, I will respond, anyone who does. And that is how close and how intimate Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. So whenever we feel anxious, whenever we feel distressed, we should know that Al-Baatin is the knower of all hidden things. And He is fully aware. He is Al-Khabir. He is all of these names, right? They all complement one another. So we cannot take Al-Baatin at the exclusion of any other name of Allah. Likewise, we cannot take Al-Alim, Al-Khabir at the exclusion of Al-Baatin, for example. How is He Al-Baatin? He is Al-Baatin because of His Al-Khabir, because of His awareness, because of His knowledge, Al-Alim. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is fully aware of our thoughts and inner state, even if we cannot express them in our supplication. So sometimes you may be making dua to Allah and you choke up. You cannot fully express to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala what is it that you are feeling, or what is it that you want from Him. And yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, throughout these verses that Allah, He says it's the same whether you conceal it in your heart or whether you reveal it, right? This verse right here that we mentioned, that it is the same to Allah. It is the same whether any of us conceals His speech or declares it openly. Of course, when it comes to dua, we should be saying it, you know, we should be expressing it with our tongue when it comes to dhikr. But sometimes there comes a time when a person is very emotional and he's unable to do so. Yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knows those words that are unable to come out of your mouth. He knows the feelings and the emotions that a person is going through. He's the only one who is so intimately close to us, but yet we do not talk to Him in prayer. We do not reach out to Allah through our supplication. And one way that we can find comfort in this name Al-Baatin is when we make sajda to Allah, to Al-Baatin. Why? Because prostration, when we make sajda, that is the closest a person can get to Allah. You can make dua. And I've mentioned this in our fiqh class. Some of you may have heard me say this. And the Prophet ﷺ, he says in Hadith of Sahih Muslim, he says, the servant is closest to his Lord during prostration, so increase your supplications therein. Meaning, we are the closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we are praying. There is no other position that a person becomes so close and near to Allah than he does when he is in sajda. So the Prophet is teaching us a secret. He's saying, since you are so close to him, then go ahead and increase in your supplication. And what that means is we need to make dua in our sajda. We need to make dua in our sajda. Now, some of the scholars said we can make dua in any language, in any salah. Some of the scholars said, no, you can make dua in any language, but only in the sunnah prayers, not in the fard. And that is the opinion that I take, just to be, and that is the safest opinion. And that is an opinion that I teach and I spread. Which means that, again, a lot of the people, they asked me, they said, is it actually saying the words? Yes, that I mentioned just 2 minutes ago, that when we are making dua in salah, outside salah, it doesn't matter. We should be verbalizing those words, right? So, for example, you will say, Ya Allah, ampun kan diriku, right? You should actualize, verbalize those words. Now, if you want to make that dua in your sajda, in the sunnah prayers, then yes, you can. And I don't mean in the heart. So you can say in your language, whichever language it is, because there are certain things that we just cannot express except in our mother's tongue or in the language that we normally speak. So some of the scholars said in all of the salah, because over here the hadith, it doesn't specify. It says, so increase your supplications therein. It is very general. So in usulul fiqh, there is a rule that anytime a commandment is general, then we take it general unless there is an evidence that makes it specific. And what that means is that unless there is another hadith that makes this supplication, this word supplication, more specific to the Arabic language, then we cannot make it specific by using our own intellect. We need to have an evidence for it. So when the Prophet ﷺ said, so increase your supplication, supplication is a general word. Any supplication, yes, any supplication, it's general. If someone says, no, you can only supplicate this, well, what's your proof? Because the Prophet ﷺ didn't specify it. So who are you to specify? If he says, I have a proof, very good, bring your proof. And also, it's general in terms of the language. It doesn't say, so increase your supplication in Arabic. So it's very general. It means dua. Dua, we know, can be in any language. Unless there's another hadith that specifies this hadith, that limits this hadith to a supplication in Arabic. So someone might say, well, what about it will amount to us talking in our salah? Well, that is what dua is, isn't it? That is what the whole salah is. We are having a conversation. Of course, the rest of dua are things that is very specific. We can only say specific things at specific moments in specific positions, right? Why? Because we have proof for that. But over here, the Prophet ﷺ left it open because he's the Prophet of not only the Arabs, but the Prophet of the non-Arabs. And therefore, he made it easy for those who will not be able to learn beyond their, who will not be able to learn the Arabic language beyond their Surah Fatiha and the other adhkar in their salah. So do you guys understand the wisdom? How the Prophet ﷺ, he chose his words very carefully. He didn't say, so increase your supplication with these specific du'as, or increase your supplication in Arabic, or anything else to limit that word supplication. And anyone who has taken the Arabic language will know this. Anyone who has taken usul al-fiqh, the fundamentals or the principles of jurisprudence, will know. So this is mutlaq, there is no qayd, there's no muqayyad. This is am, means general. There is no khas. Khas means specific. So there is no muqayyad and there is no khas to do, and this is also the opinion of Imam Al-Shafi'i. He's the one that came up with these terminologies and these rules. That you cannot make something specific, you cannot make something which is general, specific. You cannot make something which is unlimited. You cannot restrict something that is unlimited unless you have a proof. And since we do not have a proof, we do not have another hadith. The proof doesn't necessarily have to be in the same verse or in the same surah or in the same hadith. It can be in a completely different hadith, right? Yet we don't have a completely different hadith that will limit or restrict or specify what does supplication mean. Therefore, I'm of the opinion, of course, this is not my opinion, this is the opinion of the scholars, but I choose this opinion of the scholars because it is more in line with the principles of fiqh, and that is we cannot specify or limit or restrict this word, which is general supplication. And therefore, you in salah, in your sunnah prayers, you can go ahead and pray in any language that you want. In tahajjud, in your 4 sunnahs of dhuhr, or isha, 2 sunnahs of isha, or 2 sunnahs of maghrib, in any language that you want. Now but you can also do this in the fard salah as well. And that is, but just as a precautionary, I'm not saying that the opinion that says you can also supplicate to Allah in your own language in the fard is wrong. I'm just taking a precautionary, and precautionary is not necessarily the correct, because that could be the correct, the other opinion could be correct. It is just that, a precautionary stance, and that is to go ahead and make dua only in Arabic, especially those du'as that are from the Quran or the Hadith. So I tend to say Rabbi ighfirli wa liwalidayya, Rabbi irhamhuma kama rabbayani saghira, Rabbi ja'alni muqima salati min dhurriyyati, rabbana taqabbal du'a. Any other du'as that you want to go ahead. Anyway, that is just a side note with regards to this dua. Coming back to Al-Baatin. This is how intimate and close that we can come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah, He is already close. So how do we fully embody, not fully, but how do we embody this name of Allah? It is by increasing our sajda, our prostration to Him. Then we can now become more intimate and more near to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and through our sajda. Sometimes we may be in despair and doubt whether Allah can and will be there for us. Sometimes Shaitan, he whispers those doubts to us. Sometimes when we are not getting the help that we are requesting. Sometimes shaitan will have that. Will it make you feel any better to know that we are not alone in that? That there were other people greater than us, better than us, more knowledgeable than us, also had these doubts whispered to them by the shaitan? Because that is how weak shaitan is. What is a whisper? Whisper is not even full speech, because first of all, a person is not saying it with a full voice, and secondly, a person is he tends to eat some of the words and not fully express it, because he wants to be as quiet and as quiet, and also as he wants to summarize his speech. So he will only say only the real important words, and also he will eat some of those words when he's whispering. That's how whisper is such a weak form of speech. And sometimes the person can't even hear you, because probably you're whispering too low, or probably he has a hearing problem. He can't really hear whispers. That is, I'm just mentioning all of these things just to give you an idea of how weak whisper is. So relating that to shaitan, that is how weak shaitan is. He cannot actually speak loud. He cannot actually yell to tell us to do something, to cast doubts in us. His strength is as good as the whisper. If we can think about shaitan like that, then we will realize that any whispers that we get, we can cast them aside. Any doubts we get as a result of the whispers from shaitan, it will not afflict us. It will not affect us. Okay. So why is he doing that? He's doing that in order to afflict us with that what he has been afflicted with. And that is what? Despair. So I'm saying all of this in this context right here. When we despair and doubt the help of Allah, whether he will be there for us, whether he can hear me, whether he knows of my situation. Why does shaitan cast these doubts upon us? Why does he put these doubts through his whispers? Is because he is full of despair. Therefore, he wants to afflict us with that despair. Just like a person who was a failure in life, or in his career, or in a subject. Like, for example, a person who fails a subject in school, in college or university, because he didn't do too well, he didn't study. When you ask him, how was that subject, because you have yet to take it, what is he going to say? He's going to say, don't take it because you're going to fail. That is going to be the very, very, expected advice from such a person. Why? Because he's a failure. Right? He didn't try hard. That's what he's going to say. But if you ask a person who was successful, he passed it, he studied, he worked hard for it, what is he going to say? Yeah, if you study, you're gonna get a good grade. Don't worry, the professor will help you. Don't worry, he's there for during office hours. He's there to give you any help that you need. And if he sees you're doing hard, if you have a B+, he will bump you up to an A. If you have an A minus, to an A minus. If you have an A minus, he will bump you up to an A, and so on. Why? Because he knows what it is. So shaitan, he has despair. He knows he's not going to be forgiven. He knows he's going to Jahannam. So what does he try to do? He tries to inflict us with that which he himself has been, with that which he has afflicted himself with. And that is despair. Yet, these four names of Allah, if we have knowledge about these four names of Allah, Al-Awwal, Al-Akhir, Al-Zahir, Al-Baatin, and we connect with Allah through them, it will have a great impact on our lives. It will have a great impact on repelling his whispers, his plots, and his doubts. Al-Awwal, Al-Akhir, Al-Zahir, Al-Baatin. And it's not just to, just knowing them, but having knowledge of it, just like how we have covered. Review your notes, look at them, and see it from this context. He's manifest, and we mentioned Al-Zahir. He's the one who has manifested himself through his creation. Oh, if you feel in doubt, just look at the creation of Allah, and you will know that there is a creator for these things, and so on. All right. Once a person, he complained to the great companion Ibn Abbas. Ibn Abbas was one of the greatest Sahabi, and he was a young Sahabi when the Prophet ﷺ died. I think he was about 16 years old when the Prophet ﷺ died. Yet the Prophet, he made dua for him that he is given the knowledge, the deeper insight and the deeper knowledge of the Quran. And thus he was given that. So he is one of the sources of the tafsir of the Quran. But not only tafsir, something more deeper than tafsir. Tafsir is just the outer. Ta'wil, it means the allegorical interpretation of the Quran. What does this word mean? The hidden meaning. So someone came to him and complained. He said, there's something in my heart, in my chest, which I cannot even express to you. He said, there's something in my heart. Ibn Abbas said, what is it? He said, I can't even say it. That's how scared I am. So Ibn Abbas, he sensed that from him. And he said, is it doubt that you have that you find? Do you doubt the religion? Do you doubt Allah? So Ibn Abbas, he started laughing and he said, no one is saved from this. No one is saved from this. Meaning what? Not to say that we have all been doubtful. No. What it means is that no one is saved from this, meaning everyone Shaitan goes to and casts these doubts. Not to say that he was also doubtful or sometimes he is doubtful. No, that would suggest that something completely different. You have to understand. It means that Shaitan, he says, he laughed and he said, no one is saved from this, which means no one is saved from the Shaitan when he casts these doubts. But if you want to ward off the Shaitan, then say the following verse. Right? And he mentioned, هُوَ الْأَوَّلُ وَالْآخِرُ وَالظَّاهِرُ وَالْبَاطِنُ. So he said, if you find something in yourself, meaning if you find something of these doubts that the Shaitan has whispered into you, then go ahead and recite this chapter 57, verse 3, which contains all the four names of Allah. هُوَ الْأَوَّلُ وَالْآخِرُ وَالظَّاهِرُ وَالْبَاطِنُ وَهُوَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمٌ. A very beautiful, powerful, yet very easy to remember verse. And he even mentioned how Allah sent down the following verse with regards to the Prophet. He said, so if you, meaning O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so if you are in doubt concerning that which we have revealed unto you, meaning if you doubt that your name was written in the Taurah and in the Injeel, then ask those who are reading the book before you. Verily, the truth has come to you from your Lord, so be not of those who doubt it. Do you see? So Ibn Abbas, he's saying that over here, Allah, He's telling the Prophet ﷺ, if you are in doubt concerning that which we have revealed unto you, meaning the name that your name has been mentioned in the Taurah and in the Injeel, then ask those who are reading the book, so that way your doubt can be removed. And then Allah, He says, verily the truth has come to you from your Lord, so be not of those فَلَا تَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الْمُمْتَرِينَ, those who doubt it. And that is what I meant over here. We are not alone when we have these doubts, but there is not a single disease, or there's not a single ailment, there's not a single negative, except that Allah has given us a cure. Except that Allah, whether it's physical, right, or whether it is spiritual. Okay, I hope that makes sense now. So this is definitely worth your while to put this to memory. Chapter 57, verse 3. Sometimes we may feel that we are always being mocked, we are always looked down upon, or certain individuals are waiting for us to slip and fail, to make a mistake in your life, so that way they can mock you and use you as an example and spread gossip. Sometimes it may feel that way, right? Sometimes it may feel that because you are practicing, because you are observing your salah, because you are observing some of the commandments of Allah, that you are being delayed in your progression in life, or in your career, in your business. If you ever feel that way, then know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is watching from above the 7 heavens, has promised to take revenge on our behalf against those hypocrites, against those people that Allah calls them hypocrites, because no one makes fun of a believer who practices the commandments and the obedience of Allah, except that he's a hypocrite. Even though outwardly he says he's a Muslim, Allah calls them a hypocrite. They're just waiting. There's some people, I'm sure you know some people in your life. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gives us that comfort, knowing that, okay, they're waiting for you, or they're plotting against you to fail, and they want evil for you. Don't worry. On the day of judgment, look at what's going to happen to them. Allah, He says in chapter 57, verse 12 and 15, the same chapter as huwa al-awwal wal-akhir wal-zahir wal-batin. Just read a few verses along, right? And that is all in the context of Al-Baatin. That's why I'm bringing this. Allah, He says, on the day when you will see the believing men and the believing women, their light proceeding in front of them. So when a person on a day of judgment, he will have light according to his level of iman, and because of that light, he will be able to pass the bridge that is over Jahannam. He will be able to pass it. So He said, so Allah is saying, their light proceeding in front of them and to their right hands. It will be said to them, good news for you today. Gardens beneath which rivers flow, to live therein forever. That is the great achievement and then Allah, He says, on the day when the hypocrite men and women will say to the believers, wait for us. Let us get something from your light. Where did this light come from? Isn't the Quran light? You read it, they did it. Isn't Salah light? You prayed it, they did it. Isn't Sadaqah light? Isn't all of these obediences and fulfillment of the commandments of Allah, they are all going to be, even your wudu is a light, because your body those body parts that we wash during our ablution, our wudu, will become illuminated on the day of judgment. And that's how the Prophet ﷺ will recognize this. So they will say, wait for us, let us get something from your light. It will be said to them, go back to the end, go back to your rear, then seek a light. So a wall will be put up between them. Now, why are they asking from a light from the believers? Because they don't have any light. That is how dark hypocrisy and kufr is. Kufr is darkness. So they will be told, go back to your rear. So a wall will be put up between them with a gate therein. Inside it will be mercy, and outside it will be torment. So there will be a wall put up between them with a gate therein. Inside, meaning those believers that are inside this, will be under the mercy of Allah, and outside it will be torment. The hypocrites will call to the believers, were we not with you? Were we not friends? Were we not partners in this world? They will say, the believers will say, yes, but you afflicted yourselves and awaited misfortune for us. And that is what I mean, that the hypocrites are those people who always want bad for you. They always want bad for you. They're just waiting. Even if you mess up, for example, like in your salah, for example, you mess up in your salah and they will start making fun of you. Like, look, where was his attention? Oh, this imam, he doesn't know how to have khushu, and he's telling us to have khushu, and so on. That's how the hypocrites are. When they mess up, when you mess up, they will go ahead and point that right away, right, and mock it instead of correcting you. Or, for example, if you wear the hijab in a very, for the first time, like for example, you will find a new Muslimah who for the first time will try to wear the hijab, and she is not really used to wearing it. She will wear it in a way that she thinks this is how to wear it. And yet you will find sisters in the masjid who will go ahead and try to mock her or criticize her. And even I had a sister tell me how she was criticized and yelled at for the way she wore hijab or for the way she dressed inside the masjid. Right? And she was a new Muslimah of just a few days. So they will say, yes, the believers will say to the hypocrites, yes, you were with us in this world, but you afflicted yourselves and waited and awaited misfortune for us, and doubted, and wishful thinking deluded you until there came the command of Allah, and the deceiver deceived you concerning Allah, meaning shaitan. So this day no ransom shall be taken from you, nor of those who disbelieved. Your abode is the fire. That is the proper place for you, and worse indeed is that destination. Right? This is a dua that the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned the names of all the 4 names. So that's why I included this towards the end of the 4 names of Allah. I didn't include it in the beginning. So it is definitely worth your while, because when you memorize or when you act upon this verse, this dua, you'll be able to embody all the 4 names of Allah at once. You will be able to ask Allah through those 4 names. And we find that very rare in some, or limited in some of the du'as of the Prophet ﷺ, where he will ask Allah through several of his names. Sometimes we see that he will ask Allah only through one of his names. In some of the dua, like for example, Allahumma. He's asking, actually Allahumma, he's asking Allah through all of his names, or at least that is the connotation of it. O Allah, and then that meme signifies that, or summarizes that, O Allah, I'm asking you through all of your names. But I'm talking about the mentioning actual names. You will find very limited hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ will actually mention the names. In any case, so this is a dua that is a collection of some of those names, the 4 names in particular that we just mentioned the past 2 days or 2 sessions so far. And that is in order for us to have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase our sustenance, to remove us from poverty, and help us in solving or repaying our debt. And for those of you who have debt, you guys know how much pressure is upon an individual who is in debt. And for those of you who don't know what debt feels like, then may Allah continue to protect you from it. But it is being enslaved, for example. It's modern day slavery. These credit cards, these bank loans, never take these in the first place, but maybe you've taken it during times when you were not so knowledgeable or practicing. Inshallah, Allah will forgive if you ask Him for forgiveness. But it is truly enslaving a person forever. For the rest of your life, you take 100,000 ringgit loan, 100,000 to go ahead and finish your college, for the rest of your life, with compounded interest of 24.99%. That's the maximum they can charge. You will be forever in debt. And look, nowadays you have some so-called scholarships that they will put you in debt 10 years, 15 years. You have to work, but at a price that not even the employees at McDonald's, that employees of McDonald's will be making more than you for the number of hours that you have put. Like, for example, the medical doctors that graduate, right, with these so-called scholarships, and that's the only way to get into the medical schools here in Malaysia, is through these scholarships. You can't be self-funded, because the whole thing is just what's the word I'm looking for? The whole thing is it's a setup. That's how it's set up. All right. So you graduate, and for the next 7 to 10 years, you graduate just with a bachelor's in medicine. For the next 7 to 10 years, you start off with 2,500 ringgit, and they bump you up to 3,500 after the first 2 years. 3,500. And how many hours do you put? 36 hours a day. And you get a few hours break. And then you know you can't make it in life with just a bachelor's, so you have to do your master's, and then you have to do a specialty. And that just compounds, and next thing you know, this person, he lost his hair. He has no hope for anything else. So 20 years, they have chained him, and that is modern day slavery. Right? As much as they want to say, oh, Islam is, we are following this, all of that. Inshallah, I'll talk about modern day liberalism, which is a religion, it's an ideology, it has pillars, it has a belief system, it has pillars of that they adhere to. Okay, it has tenets. It has tenets that they, or tenets rather, T-E-N-E-T-S, tenets that they adhere to. And it's a religion that they actually promote. I'll mention it. I'll probably have a class on that. In any case, not trying to drift away too much. This is the dua. Allahumma rabba samawati wa rabba al-ard wa rabba al-arsh al-azim rabbana wa rabba kulli shay faliq al-habbi wa nawa ومنزل التوراة والإنجيل والفرقان أعوذ بك من شر كل شيء أنت آخذ بناصيته اللهم أنت الأول فليس قبلك شيء وأنت الآخر فليس بعدك شيء وأنت الظاهر فليس فوقك شيء وأنت الباطن فليس دونك شيء اقض عنا الدين وأغننا من الفقر, which means, O Allah, the Lord of the heavens and the Lord of the earth and Lord of the magnificent throne, our Lord and the Lord of everything, the splitter of the grain of corn and the date stone, the one who revealed the Taurah and Injeel and the Furqan, which is the Quran. I seek refuge in you from the evil of everything. You seize people by the forelock. O Allah, you are the first, there was nothing before you, and you will be the last, and there will be nothing after you. And you are the manifest, most high, and there is nothing above you, and you are hidden, and there is nothing beyond you. Okay? Remove the burden of debt from us, and relieve us from poverty. And relieve us from poverty. So I put it up here just while I was talking in the hopes that you guys wrote this down. This you could find in Hadith Sahih Muslim. You can go ahead and Google it and just put Sahih Muslim Hadith number 2713 and you'll be able to find this particular dua if you did not get a chance to write it all down right now. Do we have any questions? All right, let me. The other name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Barr. Al-Barr, it means the source of all goodness, and it also means the benevolent. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is the one who is extremely kind and benevolent to His creation. He's affectionate towards His creation, and He has mercy upon them even when they commit a sin. He has such a mercy upon them that He gives them the ability to do good in order to expiate that sin. That is how much He is the source of all goodness, that even when we commit a sin, He does not stop becoming benevolent. He does not stop being merciful and kind and good towards us. Yet He exceeds in that to the point where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He does even more. He does good to us in order that we may repent to Him and turn back to Him. Al-Barr, He rectifies all of our worldly and religious affairs because He is the source of all good. So He's the one who rectifies it. He's the one that makes everything good, whether it is worldly and religious affairs. And I will mention the verse later on. Allah, He does not stop His goodness and kindness upon His creation because they commit a sin. Allah doesn't stop becoming good to us. He doesn't stop becoming the benevolent because we commit a sin. Rather, He continues to be good and generous to us so that we can turn back to Him in repentance. His mercy extends not only to those who obeys Him, but also those who transgresses against Him. Why? Just imagine, okay? If it was not for the mercy of Allah, would the transgressors return back to Allah? It is because of His mercy that the transgressors turn to Him in repentance. So now we have 3 names so far. Just in this one sentence right here. 3 names. His mercy, His repentance, and His benevolence. So you see how they all complement one another? That it is because of his mercy that makes us as transgressors and sinners turn to him in repentance, and he forgives us, because all of that is because he's the source of goodness. He is benevolent upon his creation. Imagine if Allah was to take us to account for every single sin that we commit. Right? How harsh would that accounting be? That wouldn't imagine if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he was to take us to account for every single sin that we commit. That would not actually explain to us very well how he is merciful. But rather, Allah, he overlooks those sins, and because he overlooks them, that shows us the degree of his benevolence. Because if it was not for his benevolence, we would all despair from ever receiving his mercy and his forgiveness on the day of judgment. Do you guys understand? So if Allah took us to account for every single sin that we have committed, then that would not give us the true recognition and understanding of his mercy and his repentance. And on the day of judgment, we will all despair. We're like, no, Allah is going to... There are some people that on the day of judgment, Allah, he will be so light with them in their account. It's like, for example, and this is just an example, Allah is above this example. It's like, for example, a teacher who's just flipping through the pages of your thesis, flipping through the pages of your examination, just to see if you've shown your work. Now, he's not really grading you. Imagine if you were doing a report on the history, on a history project, and not only does the teacher grade you on the content, but also he tries to grade you on the grammar, on the syntax, on everything with relating to the language of, the English language or any language that you're writing it in, and the content of it, and the authenticity of what you're saying, and the conclusion, everything. You're like, that's it. Right? And you find such teachers, they're like, okay, the person, he put in that effort. I can appreciate that. So some people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, on the day of judgment, that is how he's going to take them to account. Because if Allah, he takes us to account for every single thing, then the Prophet ﷺ, he said that person will be destroyed, meaning he will be ruined. Imagine if Allah takes us to account for every single meal that we ate. And the Prophet ﷺ, he did say that to the Sahaba once they were very hungry, and someone invited the Prophet ﷺ, and they all ate to their fill. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, you all will be asked and questioned and taken to account for this food. And the Sahaba became so worried that, like, it's not even our fault. We had a human urge to eat and fulfill our hunger. But the Prophet ﷺ said, if you say the dua, then you will not be taken into account, but rather you will be given reward for it. So you see how, from the benevolence of Allah, from the extreme kindness to Allah, Allah, he lets go a lot of stuff. Right? And certain people will be, especially those people who have good akhlaq. They have good akhlaq. They will be the people that will, one of those people that Allah will be very easy. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he has mentioned this verse only once, or this name only once in the Quran, but its root letters, like Barr is the name, Al-Barr is the name of Allah, but there are words similar to Al-Barr that Allah He uses throughout the Quran, and we will bring that. Allah He says in chapter 52, verses 25 to 28, chapter 52, verses 25 to 28, Allah He says, and they, meaning the inhabitants of Jannah, will approach one another inquiring of each other. So the people of Jannah, may Allah make us from amongst them, they will approach, we will all be like meeting one another and asking each other about each other. They will say, indeed, we were afraid of Allah's punishment when we were amongst our family. When we were amidst our family, we were afraid of Allah's punishment. But Allah has been gracious to us and has saved us from the torment of the fire. Verily, we used to invoke Him alone before. Verily, He is Al-Barr. Innahu huwa Al-Barr Ar-Rahim. He is Ar-Rahim, He is Al-Barr, and He is Ar-Rahim. So it is very interesting that Allah He uses these two specific names to tell us the situation or the condition of these people in Jannah. And what does that tell you? From this, you could go ahead and write so much. You could extrapolate so many benefits from this. And that is because Allah, He is so benevolent and so merciful that despite all of our shortcomings, Allah still gave us Jannah. Even though we were afraid of Allah's punishment because we knew we don't deserve Jannah. We don't deserve Jannah. We were afraid that Allah He was going to punish us, but He has been so gracious, so kind. He saved us from Jahannam, but not only saved, He gave us Jannah, but not only Jannah, He made us get together, and now we are having this conversation. And all of that is because of what? Because of these two names of Allah. So wouldn't it make sense that in our sajda, for example, we ask Allah through these? Because look, no one goes to Jannah except by the mercy of Allah. And remember, Ar-Rahim, it is specific to the believers. We've covered this point before. We have the names of Allah Ar-Rahman, and we have the name of Allah Ar-Rahim. Ar-Rahman means the most merciful. Ar-Rahim means the especially merciful. Ar-Rahman is for everyone. That's why it's the most merciful, because it covers believers, non-believers. It covers the animals. It covers everyone. Allah, because of that mercy, you see an animal, a mother who will not eat her cub or her baby. That is because of the mercy of Allah that He has inspired or put into that animal. That they will go ahead and actually kill themselves and put themselves in danger's way, rather than have anything happen to their baby. That is from the name of Allah Ar-Rahman. That is how merciful He is, that He has actually put that in the heart to that extent. So that is translated as the most merciful. And Ar-Rahim is only for the believers. And that is why I'm translating it as especially merciful. Why especially merciful? Because it is especially or specifically for the believers, when both in this world and in the day of judgment. Allah is not Ar-Rahim to the kuffar. He is Ar-Rahim only. So when we say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, we are actually seeking the mercy of Allah from both the sources. Both. Oh Allah, I want your all-encompassing mercy, and I want your special mercy. As if to say, oh Allah, make me from amongst the believers. I'm a human, so I automatically qualify for Ar-Rahman's mercy, but make me from amongst the believers so I can qualify for your special mercy, both in this world and in the hereafter. And we say this when we eat, we say this when we recite the Quran, when we start our prayer, and many other things. So over here, so remember, I've always said this to you guys. Whenever you are reading, a verse, look at the end, and the end will explain the message. If you look at the end, the names of Allah, right, these two, look at the message before these two names, look at it with those lenses. So if we were to look at the lens, if we were to look at these verses with the lens, with the perspective that Allah, He is Al-Barr and He is Ar-Rahim, then you will understand that, subhanAllah, that is how benevolent He is. So because He is Al-Barr and He is Ar-Rahim, that Allah has allowed these people to enter into Jannah despite their shortcomings and their sins, and He has allowed them, He has saved them from the fire of Jahannam. And He was gracious to the point that He made them enter into His mercy and saved them from the torment of the fire and allowed them to gather in Jannah. And all of that happened. Why? Because He is Al-Barr and He is Ar-Rahim. And what did they used to do? One of the greatest things that they had was Tawheed right here. That's why I keep on mentioning to you guys how important Aqidah is. That they knew in their fiqh that they were short in it. When it came to, a few things here and there, they were deficient. All of us are deficient when it comes to things here and there. But they were never deficient when it comes to their Aqidah and their Tawheed. So how important is that in your life? How much focus did you put that? And this topic that we're talking about, alhamdulillah, it is Tawheed, it is Aqidah. We are learning about Allah. So over here, verily, we used to invoke Him alone before, meaning this was something that Allah, He looked at and He overlooked everything else, the shortcomings. So get your Aqidah right, get your Tawheed straight. Have good husnul dhan, have good thoughts. Have a good perception about Allah. He is going to be to you the way you think of Him, both in this world and the hereafter. Like one person, he was drinking, He is a Sahabi. That was his weakness. And because, his Iman was probably not developed to the point where he could leave it, because that was prescribed not in the beginning of Islam. It was prescribed much later on in Medina. I think it was the 3rd year of the Hijrah. So meaning 16 years, 17 years after prophethood, after Islam came about, this person, he had this habit, and old habits die very hard with some people. So this person, he kept on drinking. They kept on bringing him to the Prophet, and he would have him be whipped. He never did it himself because he had a compassionate heart, but nonetheless, he did have it carried out by others. He would have it carried out because that's the commandment of Allah. He will not budge. So he kept on being brought, and he kept on having the hudud, the had law prescribed against him. Finally, some of the Sahaba were like, shame on you, are you not embarrassed? And shall we keep on? So they started cursing him. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, don't do that, because I know he loves Allah and his Rasul. Tawheed right there, Aqidah. Proper Aqidah. So meaning, in this world, I have to carry out that hudud law, so that way it can be used as an example. So that way it's a set example. So that way no one else in the future can be like, well, don't lash me because I have a good heart, right? No, we got to do it. Your heart, that's with Allah on the Day of Judgment. So the Prophet ﷺ, he admonished the Sahaba for criticizing him so harshly and cursing him, saying, don't do that, because I know he loves Allah and his Prophet. Which means that this person had the proper aqidah, even though he was negligent in a few other things, and it's a major sin. Nonetheless, he still paid for it, but on the Day of Judgment, inshallah, as if to say that Allah will overlook it because of his love. Now, I'm not advocating that we can go ahead and commit major sins and say Allah is R-Rahim, R-Rahim. He is merciful, Allah. No. Indeed, he is. And I mentioned that this was due to his habit, his whole life he was drinking. And then all of a sudden, almost all the Sahaba stopped at once, except for this individual. But that did not take away from him. So you will find some sisters, some brothers, for example, committing a major sin because they came new into the religion, but they still have the intention. They still have the intention. Remember, it's not like you keep on satisfying yourself with, okay, Allah, Ar-Rahim, he's going to forgive me. No, you still have the intention, but it is your weakness. And that is between. So no one can judge you when it comes to your heart, but we can judge you. Islam can judge you. The Muslims and the Qadi can judge you when it comes to your outer actions. We cannot judge you when it comes to your heart. That is only between you and Allah. We cannot judge you when it comes to your akhirah. So we cannot say you will go to Jahannam. That is only for Allah. But in this world, we can. So don't tell me, these people are like, you can't judge. No, we can. We judge every single day. We judge people. Do we not? Do you use that same excuse when you're trying to get a job? Well, don't judge my CV. Judge my heart. Don't judge the way I spoke. I'm nervous. No, they judge you on that. Everything. So why not with Islam? So the Prophet ﷺ judged him. And the Qadi, the Islamic judge, will judge you on your outer appearance, on your outer actions. But ultimately, if you know that you are clean-hearted, that's between you and Allah, and no doubt, because Allah, He is Al-Barr and He is Ar-Rahim. He will forgive you and He will overlook your sins. So do not despair of the mercy and the benevolence of Allah, because He's the source of all good. Inshallah, we will continue. This next week is very important because subhanallah, again, just like, as we're getting more and more towards the end, we are finding those names of Allah that are mentioned only, once in the Quran and once in the Hadith, and then closer to where it's only mentioned once in the Quran or mentioned only once in the Hadith. So it is becoming more and more difficult Apparently it is, but subhanallah, once you delve into it, you will find that Allah, He gives from His knowledge to those whom He wills, and you will find truly that Allah opens the doors upon those who really seek knowledge. So this is probably, because I mentioned it's only mentioned once in the Quran, right? I mentioned it somewhere. No, I didn't. But it's only mentioned once in the Quran. Nonetheless, I think I've written more than 3 pages on this. And it is amazing, amazing how we can actually practice and embody this name and be called Abrar and do acts of Al-Bir, which means acts of righteousness. And then we can be considered from amongst the Al-Abrar, and how we can reap the benefits and the fruits from it. So Allah, He is Al-Barr, and we can be Abrar, extremely righteous. And who are Al-Abrar? Next week, inshallah, I will mention who are Al-Abrar, and I will mention to you all how we can become from Al-Abrar by acting upon this name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us, to have mercy upon us, to forgive all of our sins, the hidden ones and the outer ones. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive all of our shortcomings, the first of them and the last of them. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the ability and grant us tawfiq to always seek help and comfort through His names and turn to Him, to seek help and to always turn to Him in times of goodness, in times of ease, in times of hardship. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to relieve from us every burden, burden from us, any debt that we have. May Allah help us to pay off our debt. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala remove poverty from us. May Allah make us self-sufficient. May Allah make us from amongst those who will actually are so self-sufficient that we're actually helping others through our sadaqah and through our zakah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك رب اغفر وارحم وأنت خير الراحمين